It started like any other Fox Nation segment. Red, white, and aggressively blue. Pete Hegseth sat tall in his chair, eyes narrowed, patriotic lapel pin gleaming under the studio lights. He was on a mission tonight, and his target was unmistakable. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. "Let's be clear," Pete said, already leaning forward. "When you have radicals like Jasmine Crockett pretending to defend American values while actively dismantling them, someone has to call it out." Jasmine, poised across from him in the split screen, didn't flinch. Her arms were calmly crossed, her face unreadable, the kind of confidence that rattled men like Pete. He continued, "You spend more time race-baiting and dividing this country than actually solving anything. Tell me, Congresswoman, what exactly have you built besides your own personal brand of outrage?" The comment was sharp, but Jasmine's response came sharper. "Pete," she said, her voice calm, but slicing through the air like a scalpel. "The only thing I've been trying to dismantle is the centuries-old machinery of privilege that you and your network work overtime to protect." Boom. Twitter was already on fire. But she didn't stop. "You talk about building? I've built coalitions in Congress that actually passed legislation. I've built bridges between communities your show only sees in B-roll footage. And as for outrage, no, I don't perform outrage. I respond to injustice. That's what real leaders do." Pete laughed, a little too loud, a little too forced. "You sound like a sociology textbook," he sneered. "America doesn't need more activists in office. We need fighters, people with backbone." Jasmine leaned in now, eyes locked on the camera. "Oh, I've got backbone, Pete. What I don't have is the luxury of pretending racism, inequality, and authoritarianism aren't tearing at this country's seams. That's your game. Mine is truth." Silence. For just a second, even Pete Hegseth didn't know what to say. Pete shifted in his seat, the smirk on his face flickering just enough to betray discomfort. But like any seasoned propagandist, he regrouped fast. "So now you're the arbiter of truth?" he scoffed. "Tell me, Congresswoman, do your truths include calling half of America racist? Or do you reserve that kind of rhetoric for when you're fundraising in liberal circles?" Jasmine's expression didn't change. If anything, her calm deepened, which made her next words hit even harder. "Let me correct you on something, Pete. I don't call half of America racist. I call racism racist. I call suppression, corruption, and fear-mongering by its name. If that makes some people uncomfortable, maybe they need to do less projecting and more reflecting." The audience watching live on streaming platforms started flooding comment sections with fire emojis. Some wrote, "She's cooking him on his own show." Others just typed, "A lock. A lock." Pete tried to interject, but Jasmine raised a finger slightly. "I let you finish, now let me speak," she said firmly. He sat back, annoyed but caught in the optics trap. Cut her off and he's the loud conservative silencing a black woman on national TV. Let her speak and, well, she was speaking. "You know what I find funny?" she said. "You love to talk about activists as if activism and patriotism are opposites. But let's remember something. The Boston Tea Party was activism. Civil rights marches? Activism. Women's suffrage? Activism. So maybe the real problem isn't activism. It's activism you can't control." Pete scoffed again, but the nervous blink gave him away. "Don't wrap yourself in the flag and then act like the Constitution only applies to people who agree with you," Jasmine continued. "I've taken the same oath you have, to protect this country. The difference is, I actually mean all of it, not just the parts that make your audience comfortable." Another beat of silence. Then Pete leaned forward again, this time speaking slower, more calculated. "You're very good with words, Congresswoman. But tell me, where's your outrage when liberal cities are on fire? When crime surges under soft-on-crime policies you support?" Jasmine smiled now. "Oh, we're going there?" And just like that, the gloves were off. "Oh, we're going there?" Jasmine repeated, her voice cool but sharp, like a blade being unsheathed. Pete nodded smugly. "We are, Because while you sit here lecturing America about morality, people in your own districts are suffering, businesses are closing, families are afraid to walk outside. But sure, let's talk about truth and activism. Jasmine leaned forward just a touch, her tone now edged with righteous fire. You mean to tell me that crime is a problem now because it fits your political narrative? Where was your voice when communities were screaming for resources and you were screaming for more tax cuts for billionaires? Pete's face tensed. The comment hit harder than expected. You talk about liberal cities as if conservatives haven't governed their own areas into the ground. You want to use fear like a campaign slogan, but fear doesn't fix communities. Investment does. Compassion does. Leadership does. Pete raised an eyebrow, deflecting. Leadership? Please. What you call leadership looks more like chaos from where I'm standing. Jasmine didn't flinch. That's because leadership from the front lines always looks chaotic to those who've only ever led from the back row of a studio set. Boom. Social media ignited again. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all buzzing with clips. She dismantled him in 8 seconds flat. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett clapback and hashtag Jasmine versus Pete trended instantly. Pete tried pivoting. You keep avoiding the real issue. The American people are fed up. They want safety, structure, tradition. They want justice, Jasmine cut in. And don't twist that into some villainous demand. People want to feel safe and seen. You act like those two things can't coexist. He tried to laugh, but it came out stiff. You've got all the catchphrases, I'll give you that. I don't need catchphrases, Pete. I have lived experience and a backbone. Silence. Then Pete went for what he must have thought was the kill shot. You keep bringing up injustice, but where's your accountability? Your side tears down statues, burns flags, and your side, Jasmine snapped back, erects monuments to men who owned people like property and pretends that's heritage. Spare me the fake moral panic. The studio tensed. Even the producers behind the scenes looked stunned. Jasmine leaned in once more, delivering the final blow of the round. You can't cherry-pick patriotism. Either this country is for all of us, or it's a lie. And I'm not here to live in a lie, Pete. I'm here to fix it. And with that, the energy in the room shifted. For the first time, Pete didn't have a comeback. He just sat there, eyes blinking. Silence stretched, and the whole internet noticed. Pete Hegseth broke the silence with a grin that tried too hard. That's cute, Jasmine. You've got all the buzzwords, all the theatrics. But the real world doesn't run on Twitter threads and protest chants. It runs on order, discipline, and the Constitution. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. You mean your version of the Constitution, the one that applies differently depending on who's asking for justice? Pete chuckled, but the chuckle didn't land. That's rich, coming from someone whose party weaponizes identity politics like it's a superpower. Oh, I'll take that, Jasmine said smoothly, because identity is political in a system that was built to erase it. The fact that you even use that term as a slur tells me everything I need to know. The tension crackled. Pete was visibly annoyed, but Jasmine wasn't done. You think speaking for people who've been ignored is weaponizing? No, Pete, that's called representation. It's literally my job, and if it threatens your comfort, good. Pete fired back, voice rising. What threatens me is watching this country spiral because your side refuses to take responsibility. You celebrate criminals, defund police, open borders. Jasmine leaned in, sharp as ever. You mean we question unjust policing, we welcome the tired and the poor like the Statue of Liberty promised, and we demand accountability? If that's spiraling to you, maybe you've been living at the top too long to see the bottom. Twitter blew up again. Commentators from both sides started dissecting the exchange in real time. Jasmine's not playing checkers, she's playing 4D chess with facts. Pete underestimated her, and now he's drowning in his own talking points. Pete tried again. All you do is divide. This used to be a country where people could disagree and still shake hands. Jasmine smiled, but it was the kind of smile that precedes a truth bomb. No, Pete. You mean it used to be a country where people like you said whatever you wanted, and the rest of us were expected to smile, nod, and keep quiet. Well, we're not quiet anymore. The line hit like thunder. Pete's face hardened, but his words came slower now, less sure. "You know what your problem is, Congresswoman?" he said finally. "You're addicted to outrage." Jasmine laughed, a short, knowing sound. "No, Pete. I'm addicted to change. And if that outrages you, maybe it's because deep down, you know the system you defend was never built for all of us." Boom. Again. Even the camera crew, trained to remain neutral, exchanged glances. Pete tried to pivot to economic policy, something about jobs, about inflation, but the energy had shifted. Jasmine had seized control, and no deflection could hide it. Every time he opened a new talking point, she returned with clarity, with conviction, with lived experience he couldn't match. This wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning. The moderator, sensing the heat in the room, tried to regain control. "Let's pivot to education," he said. "Congresswoman Crockett, you've been vocal about systemic inequality in schools. Mr. Hegseth, you've supported school choice and criticized what you call left-wing indoctrination. Let's start there." Pete jumped in. "It's simple. Parents deserve control, not bureaucrats, not teachers' unions, and certainly not activists disguised as educators." Jasmine nodded slowly, then answered with a sharp, deliberate tone. "Pete, let me ask you something. Do you actually care about kids getting an education? Or do you just care about making sure the history books leave out anything that makes people like you uncomfortable?" Pete blinked. "You talk about control? But what you really mean is censorship. You want classrooms where kids don't learn about slavery, redlining, LGBTQ rights, or anything that might challenge your version of America." Pete tried to interrupt, but Jasmine raised her voice, keeping command. "I represent students in communities where schools have metal detectors but no librarians, where the only thing kids are taught to expect is survival, not success. You want to sell them the illusion of school choice while cutting public school funding and pushing them into under-resourced charter factories." She paused, letting it hang. "And then you sit back on Fox News and pretend you're saving the Republic." The comment section online exploded. One tweet read, "She just dragged him through the entire education system and left him at the principal's office." Pete tried to recover. "So now teaching kids math and reading is oppression?" "No," Jasmine shot back. "But pretending math and reading exist in a vacuum, that's oppression. Because if a black student never sees themselves in a textbook, never learns their full history, never hears their voice reflected, then what are we really teaching? Silence?" The audience applauded. Even viewers at home could feel it. This wasn't just a clapback. It was a lesson. Pete, clearly frustrated now, shifted topics again. "Let's talk about patriotism. Your party spends more time criticizing this country than fixing it." Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "You mean we love America enough to want it to live up to its promises? You wrap yourself in the flag, Pete. I carry the Constitution in my mouth every time I speak truth to power." The line was surgical. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Her calm cut deeper than any volume Pete could muster. "See, you talk about patriotism as performance. I talk about patriotism as responsibility." Another pause. Another blow landed. Pete leaned back, out of comebacks for the moment. The camera zoomed in on his expression. Not anger, not even confusion, just realization. This wasn't a PR battle. It was a dismantling. And Jasmine Crockett? She was making it look effortless. The moderator, clearly aware of the dynamic shift, moved cautiously. "Let's address the issue of law enforcement and criminal justice reform." Pete perked up. "Finally, let's talk about how the left keeps defending criminals and demonizing police. Jasmine, your party is obsessed with defunding everything that keeps America safe." Jasmine's eyes narrowed slightly. Her tone sharpened. "Pete, you love to throw around buzzwords like defund, but you never explain what that really means. We're not talking about abandoning safety. We're talking about redefining what safety is." She leaned in slightly, her voice deliberate and clear. Safe communities aren't created by more riot gear. They're built when people have jobs, education, housing, healthcare. You think a teenager carrying a sandwich in his hoodie deserves a cop with a drawn gun? That's your idea of justice? Pete tried to wave her off. Come on, Jasmine. No, she cut in. Let me finish. The room hushed again. She had full control now. I've seen mothers cry over sons gunned down without trial. I've held the hands of families who got no answers, no justice. You look at protesters and see a threat. I see heartbreak. You see looting. I see the scream of a system that refuses to listen until glass breaks. She straightened her posture, voice unwavering. You talk about law and order like it's the solution. But law without justice? That's not order. That's control. The audience let out a low, Even Pete looked momentarily silenced. But not for long. Spare me the lecture, he snapped. You defend thugs and radicals and then act surprised when people lose faith in the system. Jasmine smiled, not out of amusement, but with a sharpness like she was waiting for that exact line. You mean people like the January 6th rioters? She asked, tilting her head slightly. A few gasps. Pete blinked. Because I find it real interesting that the same folks who scream law and order get awfully quiet when it's their side storming the Capitol. You want to talk about radicals, Pete? They were wearing red hats, not hoodies. The audience clapped hard. One viewer tweeted, Pete opened the door and Jasmine drop-kicked him through it. That Capitol line? Brutal. Pete tried to recover with a talking point, but it came out rushed, almost forced. I stand by the idea that America needs strong policing, not soft policies that make cities unsafe. Jasmine responded, calm as ever. Strong communities don't need to be policed like war zones. We're not enemy combatants, we're citizens, and if your vision of safety requires terrorizing people of color, then maybe the problem isn't crime, it's you. A few people in the back row stood and clapped without even thinking. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. She had facts, fire, and fearlessness. Pete sat still. It was happening again. He was being outclassed in real time. And online? The clip went viral before the moderator even asked the next question. The moderator's voice cracked slightly, sensing the fire in the room. Let's move to education. Mr. Hegseth, your stance? Pete, clearly eager to regain ground, adjusted his tie and leaned forward. Education in America has become a battleground because of people like Congresswoman Crockett. They want to indoctrinate kids with leftist garbage instead of teaching math and science. Critical race theory, gender ideology. What happened to reading and writing? Jasmine raised an eyebrow, unamused. Pete, you know what's funny? You guys keep yelling about CRT like it's some boogeyman lurking in first-grade classrooms. Newsflash, it's not even taught there. She took a beat, letting the silence hang. But let's talk about your vision of education. Banning books, erasing Black history, and telling LGBTQ+ kids they don't exist. That's not protecting children. That's propaganda with a smiley face sticker. The crowd stirred. Pete shifted in his chair, already reaching for a counter. Don't twist it, Jasmine. Parents want to say they're tired of the radical agendas. Jasmine leaned in, her tone now razor sharp. Parents want truth, Pete. They want their kids to understand the country they live in. The real one, not your sanitized fairy tale version where slavery was a footnote and MLK only said be nice. She turned slightly toward the audience. Because when we erase history, we guarantee its repetition. You're not protecting kids, you're protecting your own comfort. A wave of murmurs echoed through the audience, many nodding. Pete jumped in, trying to inject some bluster. You're dividing this country, Jasmine. Not everything is about race. She smiled again, this time with ice behind it. Says the guy who works for a network that profits off of fear and division 24/7. You get on TV and scream about migrant caravans, BLM riots, and woke mobs, and then have the audacity to call me divisive? She paused. I'm not dividing the country, Pete. I'm holding up a mirror. If the reflection makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's on you. The moderator raised his hand. Let's not interrupt. Too late. The crowd erupted again, some laughing, others cheering. Online, social feeds lit up with quotes from Jasmine's takedown. I'm not dividing the country. I'm holding up a mirror. Already trending, Pete tried one last jab. Well, when you've got liberal elites in charge of schools, what do you expect? Jasmine barely blinked. Liberal elites? Pete, I'm a black woman from Texas who paid her way through law school and fought to get into every room I'm in. I didn't inherit a platform, I earned it. You rode a TV desk into politics. Oof. Silence. Even the moderator glanced down awkwardly. One tweet summed it up perfectly. Pete Hegseth just got dragged from a Fox News studio to the floor of public education and left there. Jasmine sat back, composed, calm, and still fully in control. The debate wasn't over, but it was clear who the crowd had come to see. As the debate turned to crime and law enforcement, Pete saw an opportunity to corner Jasmine. He sat forward, eyes locked on her, and said with mock sincerity, Congresswoman, do you believe defunding the police has worked? Cities run by your party are drowning in crime. People are afraid to walk down their own streets. You care more about criminals than victims. He folded his arms smugly. Jasmine gave him a slow blink. Then, calmly, deliberately, she spoke. You love to talk about law and order when it suits you, Pete, but when January 6th happened, where was your law and order energy then? Oh, that's right. You called them patriots. The crowd let out a gasp. Pete opened his mouth, but Jasmine cut him off. You don't get to lecture me on crime when your people tried to overturn a democratic election by smashing windows, beating police officers, and carrying Confederate flags into the Capitol. A few people in the audience clapped. Pete waved his hand dismissively. That's tired rhetoric. People want to feel safe, not hear about ancient history. Jasmine tilted her head. Ancient history? It was 2 years ago, Pete. She leaned in, voice lower now, deadly serious. And let's talk about safety. My constituents want safe neighborhoods and accountable policing. What they don't want is being treated like suspects just for existing. You don't live that reality. I do. I represent it. Pete countered. No one's saying abuse doesn't happen. But your rhetoric demonizes good cops. That's dangerous. Jasmine nodded slowly. I'm not demonizing good cops. I'm demanding better systems. If a doctor kills a patient, we investigate. If a pilot crashes a plane, we ground them. But when a cop kills an unarmed civilian, y'all want to light candles and move on. The room went cold. She continued. I can support good officers and still demand justice for the ones who abuse power. That's not radical. That's basic accountability. Pete looked momentarily disarmed. He reached for his water but didn't speak. The moderator interjected. Let's move to final statements. Pete scrambled to gather his thoughts. Look, I just think Jasmine represents a far-left agenda that's out of touch with real Americans. The silent majority wants tradition, order, and faith in our institutions. Jasmine smiled and looked directly at the camera. Tradition and order are only comforting when they serve you, Pete. For the rest of us, they've meant exclusion, silence, and survival. But guess what? We're not silent anymore. She sat back. And once again, just like every other time, the internet exploded. We're not silent anymore. That clip alone hit 1 million views in an hour. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, flooded. One Gen Z user stitched her clip with the caption, Queen Energy. This is what leadership looks like. Meanwhile, Pete sat quietly. The swagger was gone. And Jasmine, still composed, still unbothered. She didn't come to win an argument. She came to change the damn conversation. After the broadcast ended, cameras went dark, but the storm outside was just beginning. Pete Hegseth left the stage fuming. According to a producer on set, He ripped off his mic and muttered under his breath, "She thinks she's invincible. We'll see." Too late. The internet had already crowned her the winner. Clips of Jasmine's takedowns flooded social media. One caption read, "When the Harvard degree meets the barbershop realness, Jasmine just cooked Pete live." But while the public was cheering, conservative pundits were scrambling. That same night, on a late segment of Fox News, a furious panel tried to spin the damage. "She was disrespectful," one commentator barked. "She plays the race card every chance she gets," added another. But Jasmine? She didn't flinch. In fact, she logged on to X, formerly Twitter, and posted, "If telling the truth makes you uncomfortable, that says more about you than me." Within minutes, it had 300,000 likes. Meanwhile, Pete tried to recover. He appeared on a morning show the next day, attempting to reframe the debate. "She ambushed me," he said. "It wasn't a fair discussion. It was an activist rant disguised as policy." But even some right-leaning independents weren't buying it. A trending comment under the clip read, "You got owned, Pete. That's it. No excuses." By midweek, Jasmine was invited onto 3 national podcasts, a primetime MSNBC panel, and a college tour stop at Howard University. Everywhere she went, people were quoting her, especially one line, "Tradition and order are only comforting when they serve you." Even professors were calling it the most important debate moment of the year. And while Pete tried to move on, the damage lingered. Sponsors started asking questions. Bookers became hesitant. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was ascending, not as a viral moment, but as a political force. One journalist wrote in Politico, "Jasmine Crockett isn't just here to clap back. She's here to rewire the political conversation." And it wasn't hyperbole. When she showed up for an interview with Trevor Noah, he greeted her with, "You didn't just win the debate, you wrote a new playbook." She smiled. "I just said what needed to be said." A week after the showdown, the fallout was still echoing. Pete Hegseth had gone silent on social media. No tweets, no posts, no statements. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett, she was louder than ever, and America was still listening. She released a short video from her district office. Casual, confident, director. If challenging the status quo bothers you, maybe the status quo needed to be shaken. It went viral within an hour. Even international outlets picked it up. The Guardian headline read, "Congresswoman Crockett redefines what political power sounds like." A CNN analyst later remarked, "This wasn't a debate. This was a recalibration of political courage." And right then, her supporters knew. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Pete Hegseth, once thought untouchable in conservative circles, had been intellectually body-checked in front of millions. But Jasmine didn't gloat. She stood tall, not because she humiliated him, but because she elevated truth. At a rally in Houston, she took the mic and left the crowd roaring with one final blow. "I don't need to yell to be heard. I just speak facts, and let the silence on the other side do the rest." Thunderous applause. Signs in the crowd read, "We got your back, Jasmine. Unbought, unbothered, unstoppable." And as the camera zoomed in on her smile, powerful, unshaken, steady, one thing became clear. She wasn't just making headlines. She was making history. If you want to stay ahead of the noise, if you want the real stories, raw, unfiltered, unapologetic, then don't just scroll, subscribe, because the next firestorm is only a headline away, and you're going to want to be here when it breaks.